I'm going to talk a bit about cultural sustainability in fashion today to you, because I'm sure you caught on a lot of other sustainability aspects in this program already. And for that, I'm going to take you through a journey about intellectual property rights as well, because at the end of the talk, we will see the connection with cultural sustainability. When I got to look at the fashion industry and how can I contribute to it, I realized what I'm most interested in representing is the rights of the artisans and the craftspeople, the rights of the makers that are at the lowest level of the, let's say, pyramid in terms of economic stability and appreciation. So that's how I founded the Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative. It started from this need to eliminate cultural appropriation. It was very, very strongly visible in the media around 2015-16 when I started focusing my research and my work on this, let's say, niche. I was proposing then to my colleagues in the legal world, why don't we put our strengths together and start representing craftspeople and start advocating for their rights? And my colleagues were saying, oh, this is going to be very, very difficult, because what you need to do is to convince the fashion, to educate the fashion industry first. You need to go in the industry first, and then we can come and help, you know, as lawyers with our services. So I went to a fashion school, basically. In 2018, after I founded this initiative, I went to Sweden at the Swedish School of Textiles, and I studied, as a student again, study in textile value chain management to understand exactly what's happening in the industry. How is the industry working? Who do we need to talk to? I realized it's you that we need to talk to. People who are young, coming, changing the way things are being done for ages, coming with fresh ideas, with new perspectives. So what we do at the Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative, we act as a mediator between the interests of the fashion businesses, the fashion stakeholders, and those of artisans and traditional creative communities. And besides this very practical aspect, what happens is that you create a movement where everyone who's participating is learning, is looking at fashion as a form of education, as a form of promoting cultural heritage, as a deeper connection, like this program that you do, local, international. This is such a beautiful metaphor for what cultural sustainability is, in fact, because through cultural sustainability, you will see we want to maintain this very local spirit, and also be able to transmit it internationally, to communicate it around the world, so that we get the same appreciation and respect from other people. To go through this journey together, I will have to first introduce you to something that you already certainly know. In practice, you've seen a lot of weaving, you've seen a lot of traditional techniques, but now we will give some specific terms to these techniques in the language of the World Intellectual Property Rights Organization, so that the legal, the legal international global institution that kind of takes care of intellectual property rights. We have two types of terms: traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. And once you will connect these to things that you already know, you will see that you have reached a new level of understanding. So for the lawyers, for the practitioners, these are the terms that we use, but in the fashion industry, we talk about crafts, textile craft techniques, jewelry, stonework. We will see that together. Then I will introduce you a bit to intellectual property rights and the counterpart, cultural intellectual property rights, and what is a bit of the difference between these two. We will talk a bit about a rule that we established at the Cultural IP Rights Initiative, a tool that we use when we design these collaborations between artisans and designers. We call it the 3 C's rule. And this is the one thing that the best thing to remember from this talk is this 3 C's rule. And every time you see or you hear about a project that works with artisans, you can ask them yourselves, Did you get consent? Are you crediting them? How are you compensating them? This is a very good rule to have, always have in mind, to check yourselves. Am I doing the right thing? Is it really fair and ethical? Am I being mindful? Is everyone taken care of? And lastly, we will get back to the main question that we wanted to start with. What is cultural sustainability, and why do we have to talk about all the other three things before getting to answer this last question? I made here a drawing to explain a bit. I'm not very good, you see, I'm not very artistic, but I tried to explain a bit what is traditional knowledge and what are traditional cultural expressions. So traditional knowledge is defined as knowledge, know-how, skills, innovations that are transmitted from generation to generation in a traditional context, in a community. It can be elements of living. How do we live? What do we eat? A lot of things fall under this big topic of traditional knowledge. It's usually those things that you say, oh, my grandmother used to do this, her mother used to do that, and so on. I'm sure that, so I learned a lot about traditional knowledge during my field trips in India. There, everyone would say, all our family used to do this. Since I was really young, I learned this because everyone in the family was doing it, and my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and so on. Now, traditional cultural expressions are those expressions which englobe the traditional knowledge. For example, we also call them expressions of folklore. This is a traditional culture, Romanian cultural expression. This is a Romanian blouse. There's a lot of knowledge in it, like all the techniques, the embroidery techniques, or the pattern, how it is, you know, cut, and how is the design displayed. That is traditional knowledge. That's the way this blouse has been designed for centuries in the Romanian geographical region. But this is the expression, and the expression can be tangible, like a blouse, jewelry, pottery, woodwork, textiles for interior, so carpets and I don't know, other pieces of textiles, but it can also be intangible. You can have rituals, songs, dances, food recipes, some words, names. For example, in many, in Oceania, all the names are traditional knowledge. They are inherited. So the names are very much connected to water, to relationship with water. You would have names as the guardian of the fish, or the sunny beach, or the sun setting. Like, these would be how names are given. Not so much in our Western culture. We don't have these such strong meanings attached to names, but in other parts of the world, names have a lot of heritage in them. Traditional knowledge is this knowledge that we inherit. And the World Intellectual Property Rights Organization defines this knowledge, very interesting, because it says it is a living body of knowledge that is developed, sustained, and passed on from generation to generation within a community, often forming part of its cultural or spiritual identity. So what can we learn from this definition? Even though it's called traditional knowledge, it is living. So this means that it's changing over time. The society evolves, this type of knowledge evolves as well. If our ancestors used to do these blouses in a certain way, today they look a bit different, but it's the same aesthetic, it's the same meaning behind, but maybe the fabrics that we use are a bit different. We don't have access, for example, in Romania to hemp anymore as the base. This is hemp. Back in the days, we had a very strong hemp production here in Romania. The land is very fertile for that. But due to different political decisions, hemp was forbidden to be grown in Romania at a certain time during the communist era. So we don't have hemp anymore to that extent. Now it's slowly coming back, but you need to get a lot of like approvals from different governmental bodies to be able to plant it. So now they use cotton, for example, but still, so it's a different raw material that the base fabric is woven from, or even the thread that is used for the embroidery can be a different type of thread. It's no longer hand spun, it is machine spun probably. So all these things are evolving. They are evolving as the community is evolving as well. What is important about this traditional knowledge, to know if it's traditional or not, the way it is created. It is generated, preserved, and transmitted in a traditional and intergenerational context. I'm sure in Bangladesh you live this. You see these examples in all the traditional techniques of weaving, of block printing. Like those are techniques. That's traditional knowledge. The knowledge used to create in those manners are generated, preserved, and transmitted in a traditional intergenerational context. Many times you pass on, like in the family, you have the son and you have the father and the grandfather working together on the same. Specificity, it's really specific. It's associated with an indigenous or a local community, which keeps transmitting it from generation to generation. Now, I don't know how much contact you have with indigenous communities. Indigenous communities are, for example, in Europe, we have the Sami community. In Finland and Sweden, they are officially recognized as indigenous people, which are the people who were there from the beginning of times, in a way, before anyone came to colonialize or to occupy the territory. And very much many indigenous populations we have in Australia, we have in New Zealand, and that's where we use this terminology a bit more. But surely there are indigenous, for example, in Laos, and I'll give it an example soon. The image that you saw here actually is from the Oma community of Laos. Here, this lady, and they are an ethnic indigenous group of Laos, and we have a very interesting project with them, because as you will see a bit later, their exact designs were copied by a very big fashion brand, identically. So copied identically, never got into contact with them. So now we work with them to help them discuss with the fashion brand and engage in a possible collaboration. So creation, it's created in a traditional context, it's attached, associated with a local community, and the relationship with the community is not that you own that knowledge, but you are a custodian of that knowledge. You are a guardian of that knowledge. Everyone is allowed in the community, right, to learn, or maybe not, depends on the community, but it's kind of a feeling that we are responsible to keep this knowledge alive. And this is where we talk about cultural responsibility and cultural sustainability. How do we sustain this knowledge? By collaborating with young designers, by creating craft design collaborations. In many ways we can sustain and keep this knowledge alive, and this is what cultural sustainability is. So we see that to be culturally sustainable, we have to learn about this traditional knowledge and the traditional cultural expressions to be able to interact with them. I will give you a few examples here. I think I Googled Bangladeshi traditional expressions. I'm not sure I got it right, but this is one of the results that I got. Here, maybe if someone wants to explain, if there's someone who knows what this is and would like to say better than me, we can have a speaker.
can try to explain.
Yeah.
This looks like a dance festival, and from the colors and the use of accessories with flowers and all, it's probably a spring festival to welcome the Bangladeshi official spring. So this is kind of a dance form that is Bengali, which is a combination of classical moves and folk dance moves. So this looks like probably from a first day of spring sort of celebration. This type of floral jewelry is also worn by the bride in one of the pre-wedding ceremonies, where a turmeric paste and many different kinds of natural extracts from plants and oils is used to like a ritual ceremonial bathing of the bride. So we call that, like in Bengali, if you translate it word by word, it's like a body turmeric kind of a situation. But it's probably thousands of years old, and probably comes from very olden days. Before you got married, you had to sort of bathe yourself, cleanse yourself. So it was like a ceremony of that. So it's still done by Muslims and Hindus. It's probably a Hindu tradition that Bengalis as Muslims also, we also celebrate it as a part of the ceremony. So this kind of floral jewelry is very common to be seen in that event. So, but particularly this one here specifically, we can see that it's a dancing, festival or dancing to celebrate the first day of spring, most likely.
Fantastic, Farzana. Excellent. So this is a great example of you mentioned here traditional knowledge associated to the custom of dancing already. You
And
also,
especially the color coding, sorry to interrupt. The color coding is actually as such that is giving me the idea of the first day of spring, because it's usually yellow and white and red. That is, we associate this particular three colors for spring in Bangladesh. So, and everybody wears this red and yellow and white sari on the first day of spring. So, yeah.
fantastic.
Sorry, carry on.
Fantastic. Very, very good. Thank you so much for this input. Excellent. Like, I hope you can make, like, if this would be great for more people to have this kind of parallel, like having an image and having someone explain the traditional knowledge associated to it and the expressions. It's such a beautiful example. Like, it was for me. So I learned a lot more than the little that I knew about it. And this is how we can educate, we can teach, customers, we can teach the audiences in general, people who you can teach you as a designer, who are your customers, you can also teach them about your heritage and your background and the expression of, I don't know, this color combination and the associations to it, whether it's in a traditional context that you use it or in a non-traditional context, but inspired by this traditional information that you have in your background. Here, for example, we have another traditional knowledge example associated with corporeal accessories. I was here doing a fieldwork trip in India, and I was fascinated with all this jewelry, all the bangles that I don't know, even now, I'm still using this photo and always asking from the Indian students when I have them from Kutch. This was in Kutch. What is the meaning of the jewelry? And we're still exploring that. If anyone knows and wants to add something.
I lived and studied in India at one point, but there are so many tribal and different groups of communities, and they obviously have their, like the bangle that we see on top of her arm. It's probably goes up to the elbow and then again continues to be there until the wrist, and it goes from like very big to small. And then the kind of jewelry, it's very symbolic, and each one of the community will have their own way of interpreting it. So if not from this particular community, probably, it's a long way to find out how, you know, what's represented by this particular jewelry and outfit.
Exactly. So this is again how we see that, you know, when these visual, when this aesthetic is just taken and used in a fashion context without really knowing the background, the meaning, this becomes problematic. And this is where we are. This is the space of cultural sustainability and this cultural awareness and these cultural IP rights that we are trying to educate the fashion community about. Here, for example, I'm just giving you, we're just going to go quickly through the examples a bit. Traditional knowledge related to handicraft production. And here I just gave the example of the Adrak block printing, which is a specific type of block printing that you find in Sindh and in the area of Kutch mostly. There are so many types of block printing, but Adrak has some specific traditional knowledge associated to it. And the expression is this blue, red, white piece of beautifully adorned cloth. Do you recognize what type of weave is this? What type of sari is this? I don't know if you can from this image just like that. But by how many yarns are there, and the fact that it's a brocade, it was supposed to be a Banarsi weaver, so which is a specific type of weave. Again, so many times different weaves are labeled as Banarsi, but they are not actually. And the really original, authentic Banarsi saris are sold for very little money. And you have all these middle people in the industry. So the actual weavers get to be paid very little for something so valuable. The other problem is that many machine-made cloths are also sold with this label that they would be Banarsi sari, and an untrained eye would never know the difference. And that is also problematic from a design and cultural sustainability production perspective. Then we have traditional knowledge associated with hairstyling, for example. You know, this is Congolese here. It's all Congolese hair designs, and for them there are different meanings associated to this type of hairstyle. It's not just fashion. So we have so many times, right, African Americans that say we don't want you to just simply, you know, use our hairstyles on the runway or in different designs without you know, having black models working, or without asking us what it means, and so on. You have examples of traditional jewelry design. This piece, in fact, it's a very, very old piece. It comes from the now extinct Minoan civilization in Greece. These were, it can be found in Athens, in a museum in Athens. It's absolutely magically, intricately designed. I'm sure you've seen similar, like I've seen similar aesthetic in Morocco as well, and possibly in Bangladesh and India as well. I don't know exactly the techniques behind, but it's quite a specific, like many of the jewelry from that time kind of have a similar aesthetic. It's all gold, and it dates back to this civilization got extinct because of different political clashes, and also apparently a combination of you know, the discrepancy between the rich and the poor. The fight between social economic classes is thought to be a reason for the decay of the Minoan civilization, as well as the very tough climatic changes. So we kind of find ourselves in a similar spot today, if you want, you know, with climate change being such a big problem, and with this fight to eliminate poverty that it seems to never be, you know, ending for us. So are we gonna end up the same? It's just interesting how much can we learn from a piece of jewelry that dates back to a time immemorial, basically. Those people are not here anymore. So the knowledge behind is traditional knowledge, and then these elements, the images that we saw, these are traditional cultural expressions. Here I have a slide from Laos with different traditional cultural expressions. Again, you see the carving, you see these dolls, these theater dolls that are specific to the region. You see all the nice, I'll call them dupattas, but they are not called dupattas. Here down these very beautifully embroidered and woven pieces of cloth. You have the rugs here, and you have musical instruments. So all of these are traditional cultural expressions, and I'm sure you will be able to find many such examples in Bangladesh as well. Just a short recap: the traditional cultural expressions, they are tangible and intangible. And they refer to the forms in which this traditional knowledge is expressed, communicated, or manifested. So that can be music, stories, handicrafts, musical instruments, textile, carpet, jewelry designs, forms of architecture. Architecture can also be, there are specific designs in architecture that are very specific to a certain community or a certain region. Now let's see, what does traditional mean? What does traditional mean when we talk about traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression? As we said, it's very interesting because the definition of the term says it's a living body of knowledge. So it doesn't mean old or antique. It means, in fact, vital, dynamic, part of the lives of many communities today. It's a bit contradictional because people, when they hear traditional knowledge, they say, oh, it's something old. No, it's not. It's actually the one thing that lives together with you, the one thing that lived before you and will possibly live after you. That is traditional knowledge. Very interesting. So the term traditional only expresses the fact that it's been traditionally linked to a community. So for many times, there is a connection with a specific community. You might know many examples where there are specific rules in the community. For example, either only women are allowed to perform that ritual, or only men are allowed to I don't know, even embroider or weave. It depends. There are such restrictions when it comes to certain types, certain designs. So then it's really problematic when you want to use one of these techniques and you don't know the kind of the rules behind it. You need to find out the rules behind it before you commercially engage in a relationship that affects the community. Why should we protect traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions? Because they are important elements of cultural heritage and identity, and for many communities, this is the sense of pride and the sense of belonging is very strong. The second reason, and why are we here and talking about this and this combination, right, with rights, is because they can contribute to the sustainable development of the community. So the moment we recognize this community as a right holder, as a custodian of that knowledge, we don't see them just as labor that we hire. I want to do this, do it for me. We see them as partners. And then we have a different approach, right, to a partner than to someone who you are kind of telling what to do. So the idea is here that we are looking at these communities as partners, not as our employees or subordinates. Many creators and innovators are taking inspiration from traditional knowledge and traditional expressions, and we see that everywhere in the media. And it's a beautiful thing, but it has to be done right. And when I say it has to be done right, I'm showing you here a few examples when, it has been done not so right. In what sense? Here, Tom Ford, for example, dressed Adele in 2011 in a beautiful blouse that is almost identical with our Romanian blouse. You can see here two ladies, two young girls from the 60s, one of them wearing a very similar blouse to what Tom Ford claimed to originally design. So he never mentioned the Romanian culture. He never worked with anyone from Romania. So this was, you know, a case of appropriation, ultimately, a case of plagiarism, if you want, some form of intellectual theft. You have this case in Mexico. Many of these cases you already heard about in the TEDx talk. Here, the question is, you know, fashion or traditional knowledge. The gentleman, the Inuit gentleman in the original picture here was a shaman, and the culture, the traditional knowledge in the shamanic world is that, you know, you dream of the outfit in which you're supposed to be performing these rituals. And he had a dream that he was drowning. And then he was drowning under the very thick ice, where he was in the area where he was living. And then someone came and saved him. And there was these two hands that were grabbing him from the water, taking him out. And then that's why he put these two hands on his chest for protection, to protect him, to drag him out of the, you know, of the valley of death. And that's the story. And then his granddaughters still had this picture, and then they saw in the news this collection that was an identical copy of the grandfather's traditional design, and that's also a form of plagiarism, a form of appropriation. And here is the case that I was telling you about with Max Mara, who copied a design from the Oma community of Laos. And here we are today working with the Oma community of Laos to set up a digital design database and a platform where they can collaborate with any fashion designer and fashion company that wants to work with them in a fair and ethical way, not like Max Mara did. So up until, you know, this year, these projects were very, very rare. It took us also more than a year to put everything together, to get the necessary funding, because these communities don't have the same, you know, economic power like a fashion brand has, or like the fashion industry has. So we need to take care of them. It's our responsibility, because we have, you know, we have more than they do, and they have a lot of valuable knowledge that we can learn from and we can use. So it's important to build partnerships with these communities. A beautiful example of a good example is also this collection designed by Canada Goose. Canada Goose is making parkas since forever, and these parkas are originating in the Inuit culture, because Inuits live in this very cold part of the world. Snow is always like temperatures of minus 40 degrees, so they were always wearing a lot of fur and these furry jackets called parkas. And Canada Goose basically built, you know, a legacy of making parkas. And then finally they realized a few years back, 2018, that, you know, we haven't given back to the community that was our source of inspiration. So they created this collection in collaboration with 18 seamstresses from the Inuit community. They were the ones who sew by hand all these garments, and every dollar that was made, they were auctioned, sold, every dollar was given back to the Inuit community. So an investment in the community, a very beautiful project. A very beautiful project, which is in line with this rule that we promote at the Cultural IP Rights Initiative: consent, credit, and compensation. So when you want to work, when you want to integrate traditional knowledge in your work, try to talk to a community where this knowledge comes from, tell their story, credit them, tell their story, mention where it comes from, where the inspiration comes from, and make sure you compensate them, right? So either work with them and give them a form of economic compensation, or if they don't have production capacity, but you can compensate in a different way. That is also possible. We are designing, at the Cultural IP Rights Initiative, we have different projects that we advise on, and sometimes compensation can come in a different way. It doesn't have to be necessarily economic. Sometimes you can do, you know, workshops, or you can do some capacity building, or you can help set up a fund for them, for schooling of the children. Like, there's different ways in which you can help the community. It's important to ask them what they need. In Laos right now, we have different compensation schemes for the project that we're doing. One of them, for example, is to, they need glasses for reading, the elderly in the community. This is a village that is quite far from the main cities. And that's also something that we do. A small aspect, but something that is important for them. So when we talk about protection, we have two different senses. In an intellectual property sense, protection means making sure that the traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression is not copied without consent, or is not used or adapted. You know, when you change something or you change the colors, that's an adaptation. So it's also a form of copying. In the UNESCO sense, which is what museums do most of the time, and that part with, you know, preserving cultural heritage, it's this concept of preserving and safeguarding, which you know, implies documentation, implies all kind of exhibitions where, or maybe even festivals, could be part of this UNESCO understanding of protection. Ideally, you don't want to go extreme on any of the two. So ideally you do a mix of them, you know, because you cannot preserve everything. If you preserve everything, then there's no more evolution. So you can't preserve everything. But those who have a, you know, the role of the profession of documenting, they would document and say, this is how it was in 1980, this is how it was in 2020. And what do? We make sure we don't copy, but we can adapt if the community says, yes, we want to have a new kind of perspective on our traditional festival saris. And is that possible? Why not? For the project that we do in Laos, we do a mix of documentation and protection as advisors. And now quickly about cultural intellectual property rights. Cultural intellectual property rights refer to this protection sense against unauthorized copying, adaptation, and use. And you'll see that what you probably learned or know a lot about is this intellectual property, not cultural intellectual property, where you have copyright, where you have industrial property like patents, designs, brands. So patents are for inventions, designs are usually for all products that are three-dimensional, like it can be a cup, it can be anything, basically can be registered as a design. You have brands in many places, maybe in Germany more, we use the concept of trademark. So it's a mark, not a brand, but the Americans say brand. Anyway, the difference is that you can have a trademark for your products or services, but these things, they don't work with traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. You cannot protect these things with this conventional IP tools, because the conventional IP tools are limited in time. They give you protection for 10 years. A trademark is giving you protection for 10 years. For example, a design for 5 years, or it depends from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But these traditional knowledge and expressions, they are unlimited. They are forever. They are there, right? So how can we protect them, but at the same time, not restrict access? And that's a big big question in the legal world, and that's where we came up with this the solutions of creating benefit sharing models and integrating communities in these collaborations, because then you can decide, you have together with the community a formula that works for them and for you. We launched the initiative in 2018, and since then we have 14 official members on our website. These are projects with which we do intense onboarding sessions. We have a permanent collaboration, and we help them to form their vision as a brand and their actions in supporting in line with our principles and our knowledge and the ideas that we disseminate. These members are spread around 5 countries at the moment, and there will be a new onboarding in December. We have done more than 400 hours of workshops and seminars in the past 2 years, and we do legal consulting services and cultural sustainability consulting services. This is what, in short, what the Cultural IP Rights Initiative is doing at the moment. Mahila Print is one of the projects that you saw. It was, I think, linked in one of the links that I sent you. But the beauty with this project is that here, for example, the right holders are the actual women artisans who are designing the blocks themselves, like the drawings they are making. Of course, the carvers are carving the blocks, but they are the copyright holders. So we can have a model. We have designed a benefit sharing business model here based on royalties for artisans. So the artisans actually hire the designers to come for creative workshops. We changed the other way around. It's been amazing, the effect on the community. It's amazing. The designers that we work with are also extremely excited. They don't have this, oh my God, I'm a designer and I was hired. They love it. They say, I can't believe this is so magical that we can come here, do a few like inspirational workshops, and then it's the women who design the patterns, and very beautiful results have come up. The women also, it was the first contract that they ever signed. It was such a beautiful process. I was there for 5 days. We went through discussing what a contract is, what their rights are about, and kind of changing a bit the way things usually are done or have been done in this community in India. So they were happy to be part, and they are happy to be part of the project. Another project that that is also a beautiful example is a Berlin-based project, Natai Limon. I met the girls who founded this initiative a few years back in Berlin, ethical fashion show. We've been in contact, and this year they have set up their own production line in Guatemala. They have a strong team of women weavers in Guatemala, and we've put up contract and a framework and a system of giving benefits back to the community. So it's not just a simple, you know, employment agreement or just giving them work for, you know, one-time work. It's a very solid connection built with the community. You can also check on their website and see what they do and how they develop. They worked on developing these new, this is particularly a design that they worked a lot on kind of developing. It's based on a symbol of a Mayan symbol, the diamond here in the background, but it's an interpretation, a new interpretation. So to end with, we went through all this to kind of build the basis of understanding what cultural sustainability is. And cultural sustainability refers to the sustainability of the culture and artistic practices and knowledge from a community. So see, when you use traditional techniques, or when you you tell the story of a community, or when you know, analyze their sustainable living, their sustainable ways of designing, the way they produce and consume, that is sustainable. This is an expression of cultural sustainability. And when you integrate that in your design concept, in your communication, you contribute to raising awareness on cultural sustainability. We have a new project called Cultural Sustainability in Fashion that you can check. Just a landing page at the moment, but this information is there. Defining cultural sustainability is there on the link. If you care to send us your feedback with 2 things that you learned today, it doesn't have to be big, just very short, 2 lines, and 1 thing you would like to know more about, at our office email, we would be very, very happy, and we would appreciate that a lot, so we can know how to best cater for new audiences in the future.
Thank you so much.